There is a yellowed letter, stained by nearly 5 centuries of time, locked behind 7 bolts in the Vatican's secret archives. It is not just paper. In its fibers live ink, tears, and tiny dark spots that the quiet specialists who examined it in secret once whispered might be traces of human blood. This letter should never have been written. It is the confession of a girl barely 14, a girl the world intended to crown as history's darling on a single night, only for that night to become a catastrophe so brutal that her innocence shattered in an instant. In its place, something colder stirred, a shadow that breathed in the rhythm of revenge. Her name was Catherine de Medici, a young Florentine sent to France as a piece in a political game played between kings and popes, certain that marriage would open a life of status and security. She stepped into the royal palace believing the bridal chamber would hold ceremony and tenderness. What waited was not love. It was a calculated humiliation. On that night, her body was harmed, yes, but what was truly torn to pieces was her dignity. Surrounded by cruel whispers and stifled laughter, Catherine felt a thread snap inside her, an invisible strand that tied her heart to the small, bright world of childhood. When it broke, it left behind a hard, knotted anger, a fury that could not be bent. Records that surfaced long after claim that 23 high-born men watched from the shadows through hidden slits and secret corridors, as if attending a private and morbid theater. None of them knew that they would one day pay for their curiosity. Years later, they would fall, one by poison. All of them would die by the hand of the same woman whose tears of blood they watched glisten in the candlelight. Catherine kept a secret journal. Page after page, she wrote the names of each witness, the dates, the method, and even the last breath of each life that would be snuffed out. That wedding night did not only make her a wife, it forged a strategist, a woman who could turn pain into the cold geometry of vengeance. If your skin prickles as you hear this, if a forbidden curiosity is waking in you, know that you are not alone. Only 1 in 1,000 will listen all the way through. The rest prefer the version the official histories tell, the clean and quiet version that hides what happened behind velvet and marble. To grasp the depth of this tragedy, we need to go back to October 25th, 1533. The palace at Marseille glittered with brocade and jewels. The scent of the royal feast filled the halls. Outside, the streets throbbed with music and wine as crowds celebrated the union between France and the powerful Medici family. Inside, in the sweetest corridors, something different was being prepared. Centuries later, archivists would uncover notes about a custom the French court kept for foreign brides. They called it a purification. It was never written in the official ledgers. It traveled by whisper among the oldest nobles, a rumor traded above glasses of wine. Catherine, fresh to her 14th year, had no idea what waited. She walked the stone corridors lit by torches that threw uneasy shadows across the tapestries. Her hands sweated under her silk gloves. Her face remained composed, the calm she had learned from the nuns of Santa Lucia, yet a tremor lived under the surface. She believed her first intimate moment would be worthy of a noble marriage. She did not know that the ritual before her was designed not to unite, but to break. In the bridal chamber, the groom waited. Henry of Orleans, only 15. A strong body, a boy's face, and a mind utterly given over to the woman who ruled him, Diane de Poitiers, 34 and magnetic. Diane did not only shape Henry's desires and choices, she scripted the gestures and words of that night so that the humiliation would be complete. Henry followed orders like a puppet. In the architecture of the palace, there were secret ways, narrow slits cut for spying without being seen. Through them, 23 noblemen arranged themselves to watch. Bright eyes burned with a sick hunger. Some sipped wine. Some whispered bets on how long the young Italian girl would endure before she collapsed. They were not mere spectators. They were accomplices in a tradition that had been repeated in secret for generations. What followed surpassed imagination. The first touches were bait, meant to lower her guard. Then the room filled with physical and spiritual violence. Catherine cried out in Italian and begged for mercy. Her pleas dissolved into the walls while laughter slipped through the cracks. The trauma was so intense that the tiny vessels around her eyes burst. There is a rare condition where tears mix with blood, hemolacria. That night her tears ran red. Henry alternated feigned gentleness with brutal force, stretching out the suffering. 3 times the court physician, Antoine Dubois, was called to revive her when she fainted. Each time she opened her eyes, the shadows felt closer, circling like vultures over a helpless animal. By dawn, the girl who had entered that room no longer existed. In her place stood someone new, someone who fixed every face in memory, caught every breath of laughter, remembered every voice that had chuckled in the half-light. A creature who would turn humiliation into a weapon. The gray Marseille morning brought no relief. It revealed a new state of being. The shy girl who had arrived in France with childlike hopes vanished. A woman stepped forward, still wrapped in silk and lace, but with a glint in her eyes no tutor had ever seen. For days, Catherine barely spoke. She wandered the corridors in slow steps, observing, collecting details about the people around her. No one understood that her silence was not fear, it was calculation. Her shame had crystallized into a plan. Every pain would be returned. Her education at Santa Lucia took on a new meaning. She knew Latin, philosophy, history. She had learned the basics of her aunt's alchemical art. By 12, she already spoke 5 languages and could read the tangled networks of European power better than many seasoned diplomats. She studied herbs, infusions, and extracts that could heal or kill. What once was only knowledge became the toolbox of a patient hand. Her husband, Henry of Orléans, barely saw the change. His life revolved around Diane's orbit. He believed Catherine was meek and harmless. Catherine learned the lesson that mattered most. Never reveal your true intentions until the perfect moment arrives. At court, she smiled when required, accepted small insults without complaint, and built strategic friendships. All the while, she kept the map of her vengeance vivid in her mind. As the years began to move, Catherine increased her influence one careful step at a time. At banquets, festivals, and audiences, she listened to gossip, traced weaknesses, and cultivated allies among key figures. In the privacy of her rooms, she kept her secret journal. Into it, she wrote each witness name in black ink and attached precise notes. Their gestures, their words, where they had stood, how they had watched. This was not a record. It was a list of sentences waiting to be carried out. In the eyes of the court, Catherine was the foreign girl adapting to French ways. Inside her, a force grew that fed on memory and the belief that justice could be made with one's own hands. 3 years passed before she made her first move on the board. Patience had been her mask. At night, she opened the journal, ran her finger down the names, and perfected the methods that would erase the 23 witnesses one by one. The first was Jean de Montmorency, an arrogant courtier who had bet, laughing, on how long the Italian girl would last before she broke. Catherine remembered the flicker of cruelty in his eyes and the casual way he sipped wine while he watched her suffer. That memory hardened into a verdict. The poison she chose was not ordinary. In a forgotten chamber meant for storing herbs, she created a hidden laboratory. For months she experimented, refining a blend of hemlock and quicksilver that would bring spasms, a rosy foam at the lips, and hours of torment. It would mirror the symptoms that had been inflicted on her in that first night. On a cold winter morning, Jean de Montmorency was found dead in his room. The court murmured about food poisoning. Catherine knew the truth. Before he lifted the final cup, he had been delivered a small crystal vial filled with dark red liquid and a short note. "Remember what you saw." That became her mark, the symbol of her blood tears, kept as both warning and signature. More deaths followed in the years after, always with the same pattern. She chose targets with surgical precision. Suspicion never touched her. The court began to whisper that some invisible shadow was harvesting the nobles. No one guessed that the shadow smiled gently at state dinners and walked softly through the galleries. For Catherine, each death was a piece of poetic justice. She did not only intend to kill, she meant to reproduce the suffering, to send it back along the chain. Every time she crossed out a name in the journal, she felt a sliver of her stolen dignity return. Among the names, one burned brightest: Diane de Poitiers. Not only a witness, the architect. She had designed the ritual and trained Henry in every cruel motion, every sharpened word. Her influence over the prince, and later the king, was absolute. Catherine knew that Diane could not be toppled by a rash blow. Diane would be the masterpiece, not a quick end, a slow and almost invisible one. Catherine began her slow, invisible assault. The poison was subtle, administered in quantities so small that no one suspected a thing. It slipped into wine, into honey, into the soft flesh of fruit. The toxins worked not through sudden agony, but through erosion. They stole Diane's strength inch by inch. Her reflexes dulled. Her memory began to falter. Her beauty, once radiant enough to eclipse entire rooms, faded like paint under sun. At every banquet where Diane appeared, Catherine was present too.